Okay, welcome back. All right, I am here to introduce our final speaker. So if you would, grab your coffee, your water, your lunch, and come on back. About 6 or 7 years ago is when I met our final speaker here. He was presenting with Gene Watson over at the Packard Auditorium. And Robert and I, after that presentation, started talking about resilience, leadership development, team development, and realized, man, I think Stanford's going to close down the doors. We got to schedule a lunch and keep talking. And started to develop a partnership of doing this work over the years. I licensed as a HeartMath coach about 5 years ago, and so we continue to talk very actively about how to bring self-care practices to leadership and teams here at Stanford. Robert does training around the country and around the world, in fact. The HeartMath group has been doing some work with the UN, a variety of healthcare organizations around the country. He's the master trainer at the HeartMath Institute, been there for 23 years. Please join me with a warm welcome for a friend and colleague, Dr. Robert Browning.
Thanks, brother. All right. So, how many of you have heard of this odd word called HeartMath before? Just kind of raise your hands. So, in the very beginning, when HeartMath was created, its core care, its mandate, its mission, was to try to create really simple, practical tools that could help any human being, despite education levels, despite any background, any foreign boundary, any language boundary, to find a way to bring more balance to their nervous system and their heart rhythm patterns. And the whole foundation was the contribution to the field of science that HeartMath brought was how positive emotions. This is in the early 90s. Fred and I were just talking on the break, and he was thanking me and our team, because way back in the early 90s, it was our research on forgiveness and how it affected heart rate variability patterns that enabled his first published research to come out of that. And so I didn't know that till just now. So we kind of are the grandfathers around the block, but I'm a new kid in that foundation, even though I've been there for 23 years. But the core of it, despite the science, despite the research, despite all the things that we painstakingly tried to do through the 90s and the early 2000s, because back then, if you remember, it was kind of hard to admit our stress. And we were very much focused on performance and always trying to prove ourselves. And so our hope was to give enough science and research and methodology that, hey, when you go to your heart, when you actually can generate feelings such as compassion or care or love or kindness, that it actually was good for you, that it helps support our body and our heart rhythms and our brain function. And that was our single point mission through all these years, to give people a reason to go to their heart. And now, it's just amazing how every year that unfolds, it's becoming more and more transparent and honest and in vogue to just admit where we are in a real way. That we got some stress, that we need some help, that we're wanting to live more from our purpose and from the core of who we truly are. And so every year that goes by, the more we can kind of actually be more transparent on who we truly are, which is really, this is the work of the heart. And what does it mean to live your life from the heart and to lead, not necessarily institutions and organizations, but how do we lead ourselves, our own individual day-to-day life, from family to street to the gas station to our executive desk, more from the heart, in a way that's aligned with what feels better to us. And so there's been some beautiful things that have been talked about today, and it's a whole cascade of permission to say, hey, look, you have permission to care for yourself. And so my hope is, in this short amount of time that we have, is I'm going to give you some really practical tools, techniques, experiences grounded in evidence-based science that you can use anywhere that it feels like can help you. So that's my hope. And I also say that with just kind of a humble acknowledgement that 65 minutes isn't that long. So Jeff, he's a certified trainer. He's got a whole team. Sarah Herks in the room and the whole perioperative team here. They have over 13 certified trainers in the full body of this work that have plans to share this with all of you in an in-depth way, and to roll this out through the surgery centers. And so this is just to kind of give you a taste or an introduction and an experience that you can use right away. So I have a question for you personally. And that first question is, what words do you use to describe yourself? What qualities in you naturally arise when you literally have less stress in your life and you have more free energy? What parts of you that you love? What adjectives would you use to describe yourself? For me, I'm more joyful. I'm more courageous. I'm a little more confident. And when I'm feeling stressed, and I just got off of a 12-day cold, and we were just training at Stanford Children's, and yesterday I barely was getting my voice back, and I was really insecure about how I was going to show up today for all of you. Let alone, I thought I might have a mask on, but I'm actually doing okay. But I was insecure. And in that insecurity, I start getting performance anxiety, and I start worrying, and I start not thinking straight. And all of us go through these arcs in our life. But what's really important to know is, who are we when we have that free energy and we have less stress? Because then that gives us something to focus on, to cultivate, to nurture, and to allow to grow even more. So who are you? And I want to take everyone just for a moment, just turn to a buddy next to the table and just describe, we're going to do this for 30 seconds. What qualities in you do you love when you have free energy, when you have a little less stress? What parts of you naturally come out that you would like to experience more often? Because you know that's who you love. You don't like it when you're grumpy or whatever, but just who you are when you naturally arise. So just turn to each other for a second and just share, who are you when you have less stress? Okay. All right, just a little touch. So, these qualities, just a fair, honest question, whatever these qualities that you were giving voice to, how often, what percentage of time throughout a course of a day or a month are you experiencing this in its true state, in the kind of state that feels invigorating and in a way that you can hold on to, not with perfectionism, but just to have a baseline of that more of your life? What percentage of that would that be? When we were training Stanford Children's yesterday, we were hearing things like 1% to 40% to all these things, but whatever it is for you, my sense is there's a ratio that there could be a little bit more. And would that be valuable to have more of yourself online, not just when we're having a time off or on vacation or having time with our friends, but that you could create it in the moment when it's really tough. Just like what Fred was saying, when you're about to walk into some sort of environment where you know they might not, or you think they might not like you or whatever it is, but how do you hold those feelings of self-care, those feelings of who you truly are, more that eye of the storm, being less victimized by life, in all those drudgeries of our day-to-day. And that's what this work is foundational in. And so, like what our work with Fred published some research with us in preventative cardiology. We were first published in 1995 in the American Journal of Cardiology. And the technique you're going to learn today is founded on the notion that any one of us, no matter how hard life is in any particular moment, we have the capacity, we have the ability to be able to actually shift our heart rhythms in response to that stress and produce and feel and experience attitudes and emotions that are more renewing and regenerating towards us and be more who we truly are. So there's a tremendous amount of research on HeartMath.org, over 202 published research papers, and you can feel free to go through it. But it's founded on this notion of resilience. We've been talking about resilience today. And this particular definition that we created at HeartMath was adopted by the US Navy. And I really like to focus on this word capacity, because you see this battery analogy. I mean, over the scope of our life, we feel like we have sometimes less and less energy. We just call it the aging process, where we wake up with less energy, or we go to bed and we're just constantly we're stirring in the thoughts and the processes and the stresses of the day. Or we look at our cell phones, and our cell phones over time, right? You charge it and it depletes, but then you charge it again, and over the years it doesn't deplete all the way. But the more that we can learn to manage the little micro stresses of our life and infuse it more with our heart, we can begin to not only eliminate, or not fully eliminate, but reduce the amount of hemorrhaging and energy loss. But we can also build more energy reserves in our system at the same time. So this notion of these domains, we can be strong in any particular of these domains. These are domains of resilience in terms of our physical body. Some of us have more stamina or endurance or strength, or mentally we see our capacity to have resilience in that expand through the years, where we can do basic math to advanced trigonometry. I still can't do that, and then emotionally, we have the ability to have more latitude or self-regulate, or ability to basically not take things as personally. And spiritually, we're talking about core values here. We're not talking about religion. We're talking about our ability to adhere to those core qualities of your heart more often. But out of this, where do you think we tend to drain the energy the fastest? Any of you go to the gym and do resistance training? And the amount of fatigue you feel after resistance training? There's all that natural biochemistry, the muscles are tearing, they're rebuilding, we feel tired, that's true. But how many of you have had an argument with like a friend or a loved one that morning, and how do you feel, what's the fatigue you feel that day? It's a lot more. And so HeartMath, all the tools are designed to help us have more capacity to be who we truly are in the face of those stresses and be able to emotionally self-regulate in the moment. So this is a person, a man and his wife, that just left our labs in Boulder Creek. We're up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And he's hooked up to a Holter monitor. It's measuring heart rate variability. And he's journaling in a log, and he's actually annotating emotionally relevant episodes. And you can see here, in that case, his wife had said something that got under his skin. And we live in the Redwoods. I don't know if any of you have been up there, but it's basically, she was saying, can you just please ask for directions? And he had an issue with that. And so what we knew about him, so you can see his heart rate was down at 60, 70, 80, and elevated to 140. And remember, he's in a box. And he doesn't need to be that elevated, but it sustains there for 20 minutes during the heat of this argument. A lot of energy burning at that time. Emotions definitely driving physiology. But what's fascinating is he annotates in his log that the argument ended at minute 40 or 38. But what happened to his physiology? Did the argument end inside of himself? No. We tend to sweep these stresses under the carpet. The second the traffic jam's over, we were upset, but then, okay, it's behind us now, but it's still living in our physiology. And it's still affecting our next moments. And it's taking an accumulated toll over time. And so if we leave that unchecked, untransformed, unaddressed, it stacks over time and it accelerates the aging process. So all these practices that you're learning, like from Sai earlier, editing your stories as you go, or being real with what's possible, or practicing elements of getting more still and forgiving, all these are practices that help us get back to baseline but build our capacity to hold more energy. And so the more that we look at this, this graph, this is a standard stress curve designed after World War II, is that they were watching soldiers on the front line going through a period of embracing the challenge where they hit a high peak performance, that's like eustress, but then as it continued to increase and their inability to deal with the stress and the trauma and all the things that were happening, and losing buddies on the battleground. That trauma led to breakdown, more fatalities on the front line. And that informed the military to do these deferred deployments. But is that helping the PTSD? No. We're in 42 VA medical centers right now dealing with traumatic brain injury, PTSD. We just came back from the VA Atlanta, where the capacity to relearn control of those amygdala hijacks in terms of being able to emotionally respond to more who they were from their heart before all the trauma is such an important lesson to learn. So these techniques help us mitigate that process, help us bring some balance without having to go all the way to breakdown. And for us, that breakdown could be anything. It could be, I want to quit. I want a divorce. It could be high blood pressure. It could be cardiac arrest. It could be anything. So the more that we're self-aware to go, where are we on this curve, and give ourselves the permission to integrate practices to bring us back to balance is helpful. So we're just going to watch a little short movie. It's going to go really quick. It's going to play twice. And I want you to pay attention to two things. One, your perceptions of the movements in the video. And also, I want you to pay attention to your feelings, your attitudes, your emotions. How do you feel while you're watching the movements of the video? So here we go. Okay, so what was your experience on the first video? Just throw it out. Stressed, anxiety, fear, frustration, right? For most. For some, we'll address that later, it might have felt like home. If you're from New York, it might have actually felt good. You're like, hey, that felt good. The other was really annoying. But then on that second one, what were the feelings that arose from that? More reflective, a little bit more. How did you perceive the movements? A little more calmer, a little more harmonious. So obviously the visuals were the same, right? This is a 1983 Lufthansa commercial. You can Google this. And what was designed in its intention, of course, was to produce a soundtrack with the same life experience and to basically draw out a different relationship to what you were seeing. And so in that first one, for most, how many of you wanted to feel like you locked the doors? And how many of you felt like you're just get me out of here. Like, this is supposed to be the end of a beautiful resilience day. We just did this great meditation. But then as it quickly shifted, how did our perceptions change? Did you see the gentleman with his little hands in the air? We prescribe motivation, right, based on what we're feeling. In the first one, what did it look like? Maybe he was angry. And in the second one, maybe it was more like he was conducting and he was kind of in sync with it all. How many of us have this particular character in our life that we round the hall, and there they come, and it just creates a response? And it's just because of what they did. Maybe a week ago, an hour ago, they hurt you, or whatever, and it's like, oh, and you go the other way. But another day, you might be feeling more confident, more in your skin. You're kind of like, you know what? That's like what we've been talking about today. Well, that's more about what they're doing. That's more about them. It's not about me. They're going to be grumpy with everyone they see, so why am I taking this personally? But you can come in with more dignity, more poise, more grace, less energy taxation, more of yourself online. And if you notice, what I want you to pay attention to is on those days, in those moments, what does it feel like in your heart? How does your heart feel when you feel more online? And when you feel more collected and gathered and connected? There's something about how our heart is engaging with all this that can help be our guide through the day. So, one other thing is, how many of you noticed that the movements in the second video were slower? Most of you noticed that? It seemed like it was slower. There's really clear science that shows when you are physiologically coherent, everything is in alignment, the heart rhythms are beating in a harmonious way, the signal up the vagus nerve is facilitating brain function, we actually process information faster. So from a clinical perspective, from an emergency perspective, this is why we're emergency departments all around the country, and this is why I love what the surgical centers are doing here. It facilitates a whole system's capacity to integrate information quicker. It gives the illusion that time is slowing down because we're processing at a higher clip. You just experienced, a lot of you, in that second video, that phenomenon. But the thing is, we don't need to wait. I mean, all of us have had experiences, right? Where there's an emergency online or there's an accident and everything kind of slow frames and we can bring more of our organized thinking. We actually can create those states. We work with Olympic athletes all over the world and how to create this zone of high performance. And what it turns out, this is so ironic, is that the positive, renewing, regenerating emotions like forgiveness, love, compassion, appreciation, automatically generate those physiological states. So for centuries, or not that long, actually centuries ago, this was all in vogue, but for many decades, it felt like, well, let's shut down our heart. Let's not bring love into this equation. Let's not bring in genuine care and the things that we love to do with our family and friends in the workplace because we need to, be clear. But what's totally odd is that the more self-caring we are, the more we bring our heart into the equation, the higher we perform, the more effective we are, the more our physiology is online. So it's like kind of a no-brainer, literally. And it's beautiful that you all are doing this today. So, as we continue, we can go back into the PowerPoint if we can. This notion of, depleting emotions, these aren't just bullets on a thing. You can just go and Google all the research on this, is that as we allow ourselves to feel those emotions for too long, this isn't about a negative or positive or right or wrong. Emotions in human nature are so important. To embrace the anger we have and the frustration, that's all real because it's giving us input and feedback in our environment of what we actually care about. How many of you get angry about something how many of you get angry about something that you don't care about? This is my cold mind trying to catch up with myself. We don't get angry about things we don't care about, right? I mean, look at the political scene or look at whatever it is that's angering us today. If you didn't care about it, would you get angry? No, it would be like water off a duck's back. So all these negative emotions are our mirror into helping us create and produce and be the leaders we want to be to shepherd in a new world and a new environment. So all negative emotions are great for a short period of time. So you get that feedback and go, okay, I care about this. You got to get to the heart of what you're angry about. And you shift these emotions into more of a resilient state. Get yourself online. Get in touch with the care and the compassion you have versus the rage and the anger and the frustration, because that's going to deplete you. It's going to lead to high blood pressure. It's going to hurt you. We don't want you to get hurt. We want what you care about to come alive. So the work of the heart is how to transform those energies in the moment, on the fly, on the go, when we don't have a full-on retreat to sit and just relax and figure it out. How do you get your heart's intelligence online and get more into these renewing states that are self-caring, help our health and our wellness and our well-being? So let's not linger here, but the more that we're honest of what's stressing us out, like tag it, not from a place of blame, not from a place of victim, but just from a place of self-honesty. It's like, okay, I'm really angry about this. They hurt me. This sucks. Just taking us, but then the moment is, what do you do with it? The moment we're self-aware is, what do we do with it? So I want everyone just right now to just think about for a moment. You don't have to share this with anybody, but what's something active in our life right now that when you go home, it's going to be there waiting for you? It's either in your email box, It's someone waiting for you at home. It's a project on your desk. So whatever it is, it's there. We all have something. None of us are alone. Stress is unusual. We can feel alone in it. We all have it. But more importantly, how do you feel? Now tag the feeling of it. What's the attitude? What's your experience of when you put your attention on that? Are you frustrated? Are you angry? Are you scared? Giving some sort of acknowledgement just for a moment. Okay, oh, that's real. That's in your physiology right now. You can't hide from it. You can't run from it. You can't sweep it under the carpet. It's there. So now that it's present in the room, and you're like, oh God, please get past this slide, let's do a technique together. Because the moment you're self-aware that this is a real thing, we can turn our attention back to a part of the body that it's the largest oscillating rhythm generator of the body. The heart produces an electromagnetic field that extends from the body. It actually communicates information throughout the entire. So if the heart is chaotic with our stresses, if we can get it beating in a harmonious, coherent way, it facilitates us to shift from our stress. And this is the step one of every technique in the HeartMath system. So if you go see Jeff Edgar and their team, because you're going to get offered the deeper dive of this training, you're going to learn a deep dive of how this can really get integrated into your life. So this one little tool, it's a breathing tool. We've all learned breathing tools, right? Or at least have you? Breathing, so just incorporate this into whatever practices are already working. This notion of focusing the area on the heart. And as we allow our attention to shift into that area, the heart, the reason why we breathe in and out through the area around the heart, there's a lot of beautiful breathing techniques, is that as we breathe in, the clinicians in the room definitely know this, is as you breathe in through the area around the heart, what it does is it accelerates the heart rate. It activates sympathetic activity, and so it actually accelerates that heart rate. And as you breathe out, it decelerates. It actually engages our parasympathetic. And when we're stressed, it feels like that fight, that fright, that fleeing, that whole thing we got to do, it's erratic. It doesn't know how to survive. But when we can organize ourselves and bring in more balance, and we start with the breath, in the moment. How many of us breathe anyhow during the day? But we don't really spend too much time thinking how we're doing it. It can be shallow breathing, but the more that we can bring in more of an intentionality into the breath, how we're engaged with life in a way that's self-caring, why not? Try it, practice with that. So let's practice together. Everyone just shift your attention to the area in the heart. And imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area. Breathing a little slower, a little deeper than usual. It's not forced. Just find a rhythm that's comfortable for you. And about 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, but whatever's easy for you. And while you're breathing through the heart area, just notice, what's your experience inside right now? Your attitude of feeling your body. Is it a little more calm, a little more at ease? If you feel a little strained, just know, you know what? Our nervous systems have been running on high drive for a while. It might take a little practice. But can you notice that it's a little different than where you were just a moment ago? When we were thinking about all our stresses and getting looped into it. Do you sense a slight shift, even if it's a slight disengagement? Just raise your hands if that's true. So the more that we practice this, the unfortunate thing, and we're going to get into a little science around this, is the more that we can tend to breathe, it's building a coherent state. And coherence is basically a very efficient and a very effective use of energy. It's a fancy like physics word. So any physicists in the room? If there are, then that's cool. You can explain this, but a laser beam is a very coherent waveform of light. It's organized in a very efficient and effective way, and you can travel to the moon if you get the right enough laser. But incandescent light, the light particles are bouncing off each other. It's incoherent. It's not as much of an energy-efficient way of organizing the light to travel farther. So the more that we organize the human system in a way that's efficient and effective and coherent, the more energy we have to move through our stresses. A little bit more. I got way too much hair in the back here. So the heart rhythm patterns are a great window into the nervous system. We have the sympathetic, which drives activity. It speeds things up. There's a lot of benefit. And we have the parasympathetic, which slows things down. But the problem is if they're not in coordinated balance with one another. And we can look at the heart rate variability patterns to see how that is. Now, this isn't VTAC. We're not looking at EKG. What we're looking at is your fetal monitoring equipment. And so in the delivery wards, they use HRV to see if the baby's in distress. But what's fascinating is as adults, we still behave like children. No, I mean, as adults, our hearts are still very much like a child. So we can use it to look to see if the adult heart is in stress or not. And this is one single trace of someone sitting in a chair that was simply recalling something that was frustrating. They weren't in the moment of frustration. They were simply recalling it. So when I asked you to think about what's stressful in your life, your heart rhythms start to get a little chaotic. And when we live in this toxic soup of stress around our life, our nervous systems maladapt to that over time. It starts to feel normal. It starts to feel familiar. But we can train ourselves out of it really quickly. It doesn't have to take that long, because this person sitting in a chair simply did the heart-focused breathing, but then added a second step. And they recalled something that they appreciated. So just like Fred was saying, when you're in the driveway and you might have a harder home environment, can you remember something that you appreciate or love or care about these people in your life? The science behind that is really profound, because the moment we start to put our attention on something that we're appreciating and caring and loving, our physiology responds. The heart rhythms instantly become coherent. So if you do the deeper trainings with the TNOD team here, you'll even have access at some point to the technology to actually see this in your own way of where is your inner hard drive responding right now. And the cool thing with this is that if you practice little techniques, micro practices in the moment, just for a few weeks, you get gains really quickly. The nervous system wants to be at that state. So that signal, like we were talking about before, drives up the vagus nerve. And it has an influence. It has a corroborative effect with the higher centers of the brain. So the thalamus, like a little traffic cop, it's basically assigning information and where to go, is when we're coherent, it's facilitated. So how many of you, when you're stressed, we do things like we knock over coffee cups, or you say the wrong thing at the wrong time, or like you get that email from someone just with the name, and you get that response, and you start to type in your response back to them, and some part of you way back is just saying, you know what, don't send that yet. This is going to cause a lot more damage than before. But you send it because it just feels good for a moment, and there's a lot of science on the feel good of that for that moment. But the sustainability effect is, what is our end game for us? What is our end game for our overall health and our well-being and our longevity and our fulfillment? And the more that we can manage all these little micro moments in a way to add energy to our tank, that's going to help. So the more that we can be able to self-regulate, the more it improves our brain function. But the key is this in-the-moment strategy. How do we do it in the moment, especially when it's hard? And so we're going to learn another technique to help integrate this into the moment. Everything that you're learning, all the practices that you do, obviously, you're probably some of the most intelligent, self-aware people on the planet. We live in California, you're at Stanford, you're leaders. I mean, you should be proud that you're in this room. People would kill to be here. So clearly there's a level of intelligence that you've acquired, that you were cultivated, that you nurtured, or you were born into, and then all the synergy of all of it that allowed you to be here. And that's quite a gift. But how many of us learned in early school basic tips on how to manage our stress and emotionally self-regulate. Was it in your school when you were growing up? Early school? It's missing in the foundational cornerstones of our educational models. And we're working on that. The U.S. Department of Education just gave us a grant to help roll this out through school districts around the country to help mitigate that process. But we're really good at winning certain games with the intelligence we've acquired. We're great at succeeding, great at making money, great at care, great at structure and models and strategy and vision. But what about organizing all of that into bringing all that intelligence into how do we care for ourselves? And if anyone on this planet could do it, this room could do it in such excelling ways, you become such a role model for the planet on self-care in addition to excellence for Stanford, it would be blow away. So here's one other step. One of the keys is, what are the things in our life that we can focus our attention on, even just for a moment, that help us feel our heart, help us feel our true nature, help us feel good? It's renewing when we bring it into our experience. It might be someone in your life. It might be a pet, some of our furry loved ones. It might be a place in nature. It might be a place that you particularly love. It might be actually sitting on a glass of wine by a little campfire. It might even be the experience of eating chocolate and how good it tastes. We all have these renewing experiences that we tend to totally vacate from when we're stressed. Now, I want everyone just to come up with something that's easy right now. Just like we said, what's alive for you in the stress? What's alive for you right now? When you look at your life, what's an easy thing? They might have been a really grumpy person last week, but they're great today. What's something current right now that could help you just feel like, hey, I'm glad I'm alive? Everyone got one? If you don't have one, just maybe borrow one from someone next to you. This feeling, the attitude that arises when you experience whatever this is what I want you to focus on in this second technique. Okay, you ready? So we call this quick coherence. We're very straightforward at HeartMath. We just call it like it is. Heart, focus, breathing. This gets you quickly into a coherent state. So quick coherence builds any renewing emotion. We'll do it. This isn't about just the soft, loving, kind, nurturing. We work with the military. We're in all 4 branches of the military. They're actually creating these new advanced submarines, and we're getting deployed into all the active personnel. And they don't gravitate necessarily to like forgiveness easily. They do. But they're like about courage and dignity and honor, and there is a lot of care. But what speaks to one person might not speak to another, but we all have heart. We all have something that activates our heart, and that's the key. So whatever's real for you, keeping it real, whatever's real for you, you're going to be able to edit your stories quickly. So we'll show you this really quickly. So step 1, you saw. You get a stress response, you're aware of it, you're like, okay, I'm activated. You do the breathing. The heart-focused breathing. Breathing in and out through the heart area, a few seconds in, a few seconds out. What you've just done is reclaimed control of your nervous system. And you're going to be tempted. You're like, oh, I got to process that. Oh, no, there's that. He was such an asshole. Or whatever. No, no. Stop it. No. As a gift for you, because they're off, whoever cut you off in traffic, they're having a Mai Tai somewhere. They're not even thinking about you. So why? Okay, no. I'm going to control myself. I'll get back to you when I'm thinking more clearly. But I'm going to do this. And then step 2 is then you activate a regenerative feeling, whatever works for you, but such as appreciation or care for someone or something. Anything works in your life. And you generally just pause just for a moment. This can take 5 seconds, 10 seconds. There's research that says people drive 12 minutes on average in America to go to Starbucks to get a boost of energy. The drive on the way to work. Well, I do it too, but I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying we got 30 seconds. On the way, how many times a phone call comes in? You got at least 2 or 3 rings. You might even see who their name is. You have a moment. We have teams all over the country, leadership teams, who will take 30 seconds to start their meetings to get coherent so it sets the tone of the day. It takes a few seconds. In those few seconds, you breathe the feeling, a renewing feeling, a regenerative feeling, whatever works for you, as you do the heart-focused breathing. You breathe that feeling through the heart area. And what that does, what the science shows, as we infuse the breath with a renewing feeling or attitude or emotion, it helps lock that in. It helps sustain that shift. So suddenly, once you stop the technique, you're re-engaging with life. You're like, okay, you have more care online. You have more appreciation online, more love and kindness online. You're engaged, but with more of who you truly are online. It's a meditation on the motion. In motion. So, everyone got one? We're going to practice this together. Ready? All you need to know is these two little quick steps. Heart-focused breathing. Everyone shift your attention to the area in the heart. Breathing through that area a little deeper than usual. Finding a rhythm that's comfortable. And step 2, while you continue the breathing, make a sincere attempt to re-experience a regenerative feeling such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life or whatever works for you. And breathe that feeling through the heart area. So now, while you continue to breathe, just notice, what is it you're experiencing? A little more joy, appreciation, care, compassion, whatever it might be. It might be just a little bit more neutral about your stresses, a little more ease. Whatever it is, if it's a little less stress, you've just won the game. Just little micro improvements is all that's needed. Those add. People who save a few dollars here and there, it adds over time. You save a little energy here and there. So keep breathing this feeling through the heart area while I'm talking. So try to practice this. Keep your attention in the area around the heart. And while I go into this next section, just imagine, all right, we're going to practice just for a moment, just for the sake of practice, focusing in the area around the heart while I'm listening to this dude on stage. And just start getting that inner reference point that you can do both and. And you might even start to notice a little more clarity, a little more focus, a little bit more of who you are. It actually feels a little bit better versus trying to get it all right. Boom, you're online, okay? And the other cool thing about this, so keep focusing, is that whatever you use, this isn't a by location technique. This isn't like, okay, this person's yelling at me, they're stressed. I'm going to go think about my rainbow moment in Hawaii for a second. Sorry, you can do this. It's not about that. Yes, you in certain cases, but the second you go, hey, I remember that. I'm actually kind of a happy guy, and I wasn't taking things personally when I saw someone arguing. It's like you have more of yourself online, more of your coherent heart online, where you can engage more appropriately, with more clarity, more of who you naturally are, versus escalating a stressful situation. So you basically are shifting your attention, but then re-engaging more of who you are right in the moment. So it's not by location. It's just basically a shortcut. And as you practice, you don't need to even do that. As someone, if he has a stressful moment, you have all these reference points of, I know they are having a hard day. I know they probably have a whole, we talked about this today already, like a whole life of stress that has nothing to do with this moment. So there's more compassion naturally, or there's more compassion for yourself, or there's more whatever. It just becomes more liquid in the moment. So these are police officers in Santa Clara County. We did 8 police office stations in the whole area. And they were in live simulations. So this is a police officer that was trained in just this one technique, quick coherence. And he had a practice protocol of when he was going to use it before a stressful encounter and after a stressful encounter to rebalance. So this officer basically pulls up the squad car. He's in a scenario, it's a domestic violence scenario. There's a person who's potentially abusing someone in the house. And when they go inside, he actually encounters the angry man. And they're in this altercation, but they're not like in an altercation. They're just standing looking at each other. And you see how quickly the heart rate jacks up. It's a tense moment. But you remember the husband and wife arguing, leaving our facilities earlier in the presentation? He thought the argument ended, but he wasn't really trained. We were just measuring him for blood pressure reasons. He couldn't get back to baseline, but this officer could. This officer, within about 7 minutes, got all the way back to baseline. This is huge. Because how many of you have seen the research around our police officers and firefighters and when they actually retire? And the amount of cardiac arrest from all the accumulations of stresses. This is real stuff. How stressful is it to be a leader at Stanford University? It's stressful. You're like one of the best in the country. It's like you got a big mantle on your shoulders. So the more that we allow that taxation to accumulate over time, we're hurting ourselves. But like you have ways, and now you have support. You have an entire training team who's ready to help you get back to baseline. So you can really have more life and more fulfillment in your life. So this is what the officer does, and here's another graph. This is an actual, someone that was frustrated with a coworker. This is actually at Hewlett-Packard. And this person was frustrated, but he was trained and got back to normal pretty quickly. What we didn't tell you is the officers that were untrained in this scenario, they stayed elevated at the very least for 8 hours, and in some cases 3 days. So the more that we practice, now these are teenage students coming out of Monterey, the Monterey area, Salinas Valley schools. These two are emblematic of 140 students that went through these, teenagers. And they did a resting baseline protocol. What happens is as you practice and you see immediate shifts, remember I told you over time, your nervous system readapts to a more optimal state. So we're not having to always practice. It's not so much work. We start to just be more of a steady state, more at rest on the inside while everything else is going to hell. So what happens is these two students, they did a resting protocol, pretending they're waiting for the bus for 3 minutes or 4 minutes. And what do you notice? What do you notice the difference here? Basically from here, it's a lot more, chaotic? And you can see there's not much variability. There's this fascinating notion about heart rate variability. So for those in the fetal monitoring area, is when we're born, we have this huge flexibility in the heart rhythm patterns, like a 30-plus point spectrum. And over time, at age 30, every year, with science after looking at thousands and thousands of these, it decreases by about 3%. So when you're about in your end stages of life, your HRV, your flexibility in your heart rhythm patterns are really, really small. It's the greatest indicator of all-cause mortality, meaning if we don't have flexibility there, we're more susceptible to disease and pathogens, less ability to run from a fire. So these kids, they're in their early teens. You already see this compromising in their nervous system from all the bullying and the stress of our today's world. They practice this technique for a few months, and that's their resting baseline 4 months later. What do you see the difference here? More range. There's more flexibility. They're actually slowing down the aging process. And it's more coherent, which means they're thinking more clearly, less susceptible to bullying and peer pressure. They're becoming more functional human beings to have a more fulfilling life. So everything you learn today, please, give it to your kids. You have full permission. Just give it. We want you to give this to the family members. This is what we're going to do also in the surgery things we're doing. Not only is it for the teams and for coherent teams working together and for self-care, but it's to give to your patients and to your families and to your friends. This is a gift that can keep giving. So we'll skip all this. There's all these cool things that you can look at but let's get into some more fun stuff because our time will run out. Is the more we take care of ourselves, there's all these notions of what does it mean to lead from the heart? And there's all these beautiful things of what that means. Leading from purpose, leading from service, leading from honor, from love and care, from functionality and clarity and efficiency. There's all these things on, how to lead from the heart. But when we take it down to the nuts and bolts and practical levels of our micro life, how are we leading ourselves through this maze of life? How many can admit life's pretty stressful right now? We all can't escape it. It's everywhere. It's on the news. It's in our life. We're meeting these hinge points in our life that are really stressful. And it does evolve. We all know this, right? How many of you have had someone in your life that you had a really tense relationship with or some situation, and you finally got to the heart of the matter? Maybe you really heard them. You finally saw past. It wasn't taking personally. Now there's a little healing there. There's a little more of a heart connection there. And it's a little less stressful. And then suddenly that kind of disappears. And then you suddenly have another stressful situation that's not relative to that at all. Our life, I don't know what's doing it to us, if it's our larger intelligence, but we're like on this game board of trying to learn how to be more balanced, how to learn how to love more, how to care more, and not get wiped out. So leading with our heart very first starts with self-care. Leading ourselves out of this maze of what we call life and planet Earth and the density that's here into a zone that we can then naturally lead others. There's a lot of research that people will, they want to follow people who are leading when they're actually leading from their heart. And they feel cared for, they feel listened to, as opposed to like a command and control. And so when we look at, when you take care of yourself, what that does to the environment, it's quite phenomenal. We look at the ECG. The heart produces electricity. Basic law of physics is the heart, anything that produces electricity produces an electromagnetic field. Basic law. This isn't an aura, it's measured in hertz. Radio towers transmit signals through electromagnetic fields. Radio information, visual information, it goes through walls. We take that for granted, right? Right now, in this room, there are radio signals. There's smooth jazz, there's rock and roll, there's, whatever, our favorite sports station. But we need a little transistor to harness those frequencies to be able to hear and translate it. It turns out the heart is doing the exact same thing. With instrumentation built in 1902 by Dr. Einthoven, you actually could measure these frequencies, this electromagnetic field, 3 feet from the body. It actually goes through the skin, it goes through walls, and the information in that field changes. It's connected to, what do you think? The heart. That's what we're talking about. Whatever the heart's doing, if it's chaotic, the information in that is distorted. If it's coherent, it's producing that field. How many of you know that there's a certain friend you like to be with, that you just enjoy? We say words like, we enjoy just being with them, or being in their presence, or we feel good when we're with them. Or how many of you have walked into a room where it was a real tense meeting, and you're like, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife? What are we talking about? This stuff is actually quite real. And it turns out scientists can actually look at the frequency pattern of these fields and with a 70% accuracy detect emotionally specific states. So they could actually look at this pattern in frequencies and say, oh, this person's experiencing frustration. Just by looking through spectral analysis of these fields. Oh, this person's experiencing appreciation. And what happens is these fields interconnect. Not to spook anyone out, but everyone, 3 feet from the body? I mean, it actually goes a little farther than that. But we're all in each other's heart fields. So, for example, when I'm feeling a certain way, it's affecting the other. And vice versa. So what we hold in our heart actually truly matters. How we actually deliver information matters. That's why words like authenticity are so important. That's why when we're doing these crucial conversations or whatever other things that we're doing to impart information in sensitive ways that could be triggering to our staff, sure, we still have to deliver the bottom line. We still need to deliver these hard messages, but to do it from a place, you got to check yourself first. Am I stressed about this? Am I forceful about this? Or am I coming from a place of, I know this is going to be hard for them to receive. I'm going to have compassion for them. But I still care about the situation. So I'm going to activate my care, my compassion, and I'm going to go ahead and still deliver this hard message, but in a way that's heartfelt. And that's hard to do, but it's very easy to do. Once we, like Fred was saying, make the decision to do it. We just have to decide to do it. And at the very least, do it for yourself. Because if your heart's like this, you're going to live longer. You're going to be more healthier. And at the same time, you're going to be a more effective leader. People are going to listen to you. So, Josh, how many of you have a dog or a cat, a pet? So this is how these signals actually influence each other too. So we got Mabel on the top, measuring HRV. We have Josh on the bottom, HRV. Separate rooms, door opens. Josh is instructed to simply love Mabel, feel appreciation for Mabel. And what do you notice about their two heart rhythm patterns? They get in sync. He's not touching, he's not petting, he's not talking, he's just feeling appreciation. And their heart rhythms literally get in sync. There's this, basically because the heart is this big drum beat, just like in the band, usually the drum sets the tone. and everything kind of gets in sync with it. Because it's the biggest oscillating rhythm generator, it tends to have a whole systems effect. When you're coherent, things are more in sync and aligned. And then when you're standing next to someone else, it helps them get more coherent. So team coherence, the more people that are practicing this at the individual level, the more the teams become more coherent. This is why it's really exciting what your surgery centers are doing. The more coherence is there, it's just going to even add another extra advantage and excellent edge to everything else that's going on. It's just add a little heart, it's going to help. Pretty simple. And also, when we do experiments, we did 10 groups of 4 individuals, where 3 knew how to do quick coherence and just had a protocol of when they were going to do it. The 4th person didn't know about it, didn't know what was going on, and as the 3 generated that field, it's just a physics trick. The 4th person, guess what? What happened to the 4th person? Got coherent. It's just like it was a higher ratios of coherent. And that is just basic law of how physics and different energetics correlate with one another. So we're going to practice one other thing. How do we integrate these practices of the heart into an active communication? So we've been budding with each other. But what I want to have you do is we're going to pair into 2s. And we're all going to get coherent together. And I'm going to ask you, as a speaker, we're going to have a speaker and a listener. And if there happens to be a 3rd person involved, maybe you just decide to kind of observe the situation. But we're going to do pairs of 2s. And the speaker is going to speak about, the topic is something that you're developing in yourself, that you're wanting to help cultivate in the heart of you, to help you in terms of how you're expressing yourself as a leader in the world. Meaning, not just here at Stanford, in the community, at home, here at Stanford, just with yourself in your private moments. What parts of your heart would you actually want to cultivate over the next few months that would help add to your capacities and everything else you have to handle as a leader? And the speaker, we're going to time this. It's going to be a 3-minute exercise at 60-second intervals. And the speaker is going to speak about that part of their heart. This is what I want to develop for me, I'll tell you what mine is. If I was to develop something, I would like to not have as much projectional worry in my life. For me, I see how that robs a lot of energy for me. I'd like to not necessarily have an event coming down and worrying about it. I'd rather take that energy and just prepare my heart as well as the material in a more of a confident way. That's something I'm working on. So I would share about that just vulnerably. And then the listener is going to have 60 seconds to mirror the essence of what you heard. Not verbatim, not every word. You might even hear something they didn't say. But during that first 60 seconds, for you listeners, all you're going to do is you're going to create a coherent field. You're going to appreciate this speaker. You're just going to appreciate it. Keep it simple, Feel appreciation for this person in front of you. But for that first 60 seconds, don't try to fix it. Don't try to overly study it. Don't analyze it. Just hold your heart with them. This is what the practice is for this tool. For 60 seconds, just be silent. Speaker's going to give you 60 seconds. Listener, you have now 60 seconds to talk. You're going to give the essence of what you just heard. Well, I heard, and if someone was talking to me, they'd probably say, you know what? I hear that you're more scared than you think about with a lot of things, and you need to stop worrying. They might hear a deeper part of what's going on that I didn't even give voice to. If you feel that, share it. And I'll give you a final minute for the 2 of you to kind of refine each other, with the speaker to say, wow, there's actually more here I want to say. This is more of what I want to develop. 3 minutes total, but I'll time you at 60-second intervals. Is that clear so far? So what we're going to do is we're going to do it twice. I think we have just enough time to do that. Do it twice, and then so you all get to experience what it feels like to be listened to from a coherent place, and also to listen to from a coherent place. Does that make sense? So, in the next 30 seconds, everyone pair into 2s, and if you're a 3rd, just be cool with it. Pair into 2s, and speakers raise your hands, because we're going to do a quick coherence together. 30 seconds, decide who's speaking first. And speakers, raise your hands. All right, who's speaking first? Speakers, raise your hand. All right. Okay, Let's bring it back to center. We're all gonna come back to center for a second. We're not starting yet. All right? You ready? We're all gonna go to our heart together, and then I'll time you at 60-second intervals. You ready? Shh. Okay? All right? Everyone together, heart-focused breathing. Let's breathe through the area around the heart. A few seconds in. A few seconds out. Heart-focused breathing. For those of you who are talking, just breathe while you're talking. Practice that if you can't stop talking. Activate appreciation for this person in front of you. That you get to share this moment with somebody. All right. Speakers, you have 60 seconds. Share what you want to cultivate in the next few months at the heart level.
Jeff said, you're doing time-wise doing fine, but he said he would just shut it down after or
One
start
round.
when they're done with this.
This round. Okay. That's fine.
Does that work for you?
Yeah. Okay, speakers, that was 60 seconds. Listeners, feedback the essence of what you've heard the speaker give you so far. Feedback the essence of what you've heard the speaker give you. Okay, 60 seconds left. Just for refinement, 60 seconds more. Okay, that was 3 minutes. All right. So we're running a little low on time. And the great thing about me knowing that you have a team here to go into a deeper training is we won't be able to do the vice versa role right now because we're gonna be closing in a few seconds. But how many of you felt a little better in that kind of conversation? How often are we having conversations of all the stuff that's going wrong and all the things that are problematic and all the things, but speaking about something in our heart and listening to each other in that way? How many of you felt heard from your listeners? How often do we feel heard in 60 seconds? There's a lot of research that people will often leave their managers and leaders just because they don't feel heard. So the more we can shift our attention and have equal emphasis in our leadership capacities of not trying to necessarily problem solve everything or fix everything or always have the right answer, the more that we can also add our heart to that situation and just give them our heart for 60 seconds and appreciate them, it helps them in their own clarity. It helps them in their own capacity to feel connected to. There's all this amazing research, too, about lawsuits and different medical mistakes. I know you've seen this in Malcolm Gladwell's work, too, around you could just listen to the tone of how the physician was actually talking about a particular situation and not listen to the actual content at all. And people could identify if that led to a lawsuit or not. And it's just about when we hold a different emotion or feeling or gratitude, it affects everything. It affects our tone, our physiology. It affects even the clarity on what we say appropriately and when. This takes practice. For many of you, it's natural. For some of us, it's work. But the more we can just practice a little bit more, it's helpful. And the notion, I want to also honor Dale Beatty in the room, and Anita Gerard, and Gisu and Grisel, and the whole nursing staff, because they've also brought in this thing called the caring theory. And if you've heard about that, the heart and soul of the caring theory is about manifesting more care at the heart level with everything we do. And then this is in the partnership that we do with them is bringing in these exercises and these methods to help that come alive at the heart level, in the street, where it gets dirty, where it gets really messy, but from us online. And so a couple of these slides actually came from a magnet presentation that Dale and I just did with Gisu. And when you get masses of populations doing this together, we see shifts. This is a medical surgical unit here locally in Northern California where we see 53% of them were feeling tired often to always. How does that affect how we actually do our practice? Tired, fatigued, anxiety, but then after practicing even what you learned, just for a few weeks in a consistent way, self-reported in an anonymous way, they were seeing massive shifts in their energy levels, feeling way less fatigue, way less anxiety, more, and all that energy savings leads to more gratitude, more dynamism, more presenteeism. And how does that affect our sleep? 41% weren't getting enough sleep. That dropping to 21 just after a few weeks. Stress-related body aches, muscle tension, headaches, and even things of how it affects how we relate to our staff. Tension between management and staff went from 41 to 26%. The management weren't in that training. So the staff were just becoming more self-regulated on how they were perceiving their managers. This is a great reason to give it to your staff, I guess, because basically they're more self-responsible with their own stresses as you're in this working relationship with one another. So you expand this out, 33 medical centers around the country, 5,600, same shifts. We're all human, we all have a heart, we all respond to these in the same way. Same shifts across the board, no matter where you are, where we are in the world. And it sustains. This is with our corporate work. Unilever, Royal Dutch Shell, Motorola, Hewlett-Packard, and Boeing, they didn't practice after 6 weeks. Once they integrated this intelligence, integrated the practice, their nervous systems changed. And we measured them again a few months later, and it had stabilized. So this isn't like a flavor of the week or just another thing to incorporate. We're integrating a new intelligence on how we operate day to day, moment to moment in our lives. When we give this to our patients, we do a meta-analysis with blood pressure. We see an equivalent of a 40-pound weight loss with people practicing this. It's twice the impact of a salt-restricted diet and twice the impact of a normal exercise program just by getting more coherent. This congestive heart failure, this was with Fred. This was our original preventative cardiology work. We saw a 14% improvement on the 6-minute walk. They were walking farther just by getting more coherent right after congestive heart failure or having that condition. Statistically significant shifts in depression. And so we're grateful for Fred's corroborative work with that, but then just building in these coherent skills. Heart arrhythmia, anything that's inflammatory or stress-producing, the more balance we bring in, we see improvements. And it affects the bottom line. And we see less medical errors, we see less stress-related turnover, we see increased satisfaction because it's just working a little more smoothly. Stanford, we've been doing a lot with Stanford, but it's such a big universe that it's all over the place. But what's really important is, and Jeff, I promised I'd get a picture of you in here somewhere. Just sorry, Jeff, not to call you out, but there's Jeff. But this is a new training team. You actually have a lot of Caritas coaches up Dale who are and a lot of HeartMath trainers who are really well versed in this heart-based work, and they're ready to go. They're going to offer this once you leave this event. You're going to have access to this for a deeper training, and they're going to do a way better job than what I did. They know you. They know your culture. They'll give it context for you. So use your resource and also all the perioperative work that's happening. Beautiful stuff. So in light of that, I'm grateful that you're here. And I'm grateful that you're in a place where you're open to actually help yourselves and just life from the heart in a way that's more meaningful for you. And I'm here to help in however I can. I have a very long-term commitment to all of you. And as you can see, that's actually my cell and my email. If you have any questions, you can write to me. You can text me. Jeff and I are very tight. Dale and I, all of our work. This is a long term to take care of you and however we can. So whenever you're ready, we're here. And hopefully this was helpful. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert.